I'll never forget walking into the hospital that day. My father's cancer had spread. There was nothing they could do but give him 6 months to live and send him home to die. I remember the doctor well. He was a kind man with a difficult job. I admired my father's courage as he grappled with the news of his impending death. Years later, I met Mary Harrington.
I was diagnosed with malignant melanoma. At that point, he gave me 3 to 6 months to live.
How long was it before you started to notice changes?
I didn't die. So I knew something was happening. As a matter of fact, we were cleaning vegetables and my son turned around and said, "Mom, weren't you supposed to have..." And I said, "Been gone by now?" "Yes, but here, it's 7 months and I'm still here." 10 months on the diet, I had my first scan, and I was clear, and I've been clear since.
Mary's not alone. Every year, thousands of people reverse a wide spectrum of cancers by going outside the system to seek alternative treatments. As I researched these treatments, I couldn't help but think about my father's doctor. Why didn't he know about these? As I've come to find out, if he did know and recommended an alternative treatment for cancer, he could not only lose his license, but go to jail. This didn't make sense to me. It didn't make sense that Mary had to travel out of this country to get simple dietary treatments for cancer. Over the years, I've come to learn that when something doesn't make sense, if you follow the money, you'll usually find the answer. That's when I learned about the business of cancer. As you will soon discover, the search for a cure is hardly the altruistic endeavor you've been led to believe. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Even worse, when you look at the hard numbers, our current cancer treatments are appallingly ineffective. If you're a survivor of conventional cancer treatments, I both admire and congratulate you, because you've not only survived the disease, but the treatment. Unfortunately, you're part of a very small minority compared to the vast numbers of people who did not survive. And regardless how you may feel about conventional treatments, it's important that you watch this, because the chances cancer will return are almost certain unless you start making some big changes in your life. Over the years, there have been a lot of false claims and promises about cancer treatments from quacks, charlatans, con artists, and snake oil salesmen, all raising hopes of a cure for cancer.
These quacks, once they get to a patient, anything can happen. Proper treatment can be delayed often until it's too late.
This fake device claimed to cure cancer with tape-recorded music. The practitioner who used it was as big a phony as his device. Help stamp out quackery.
Mom, a quack is a quack, whether he comes from the South Seas or lives right here in the city. All he's interested in is taking money from people.
But when it comes to taking money from people by making false claims, no one does it better than conventional mainstream medicine. A cure is just around the corner has been the standard public relations pitch used to pump money into the cancer industry. And it was as familiar to your parents as it is to you. The medical community has been working on a cure for well over 100 years. The war on cancer was simply a massive infusion of funds, which ended up creating a bloated and ineffective medical bureaucracy. Some of those involved in the war saw this from the very beginning. "14 years after the war began, a landmark study showed that chemotherapy, the main weapon in the war, was somewhat effective for only 2 to 3% of all cancer patients, primarily those with the rarest kinds of cancer. And things have not changed since then. Here are the results of a study of every randomized, controlled clinical trial performed in the U.S. between 1990 and 2004, which reported a statistically significant increase in 5-year survival due to the use of chemotherapy. What you see are goose eggs, or near goose eggs, for all of our major cancers. This latest study simply confirmed every study that has been conducted since the war on cancer began. The highest scores, testicular and Hodgkin's, represent only 2% of all cancers, and these rates are themselves not impressive. The medical profession generally considers any drug with less than 30% effectiveness to be no better than a placebo. What you see from studies conducted over the last 50 years is that for our major cancers, the effectiveness of conventional treatments is far less than a sugar pill. One of the problems with our approach to cancer is that it's focused on the tumor. In fact, you could say conventional medicine has a tumor fetish. The appearance of a tumor is like the appearance of idiot lights in your car. They appear only after a problem has developed. So what do? We try to shrink the tumor, cut it out, or we start amputating body parts to get rid of it. Can you see anything wrong with this picture? What caused the tumor in the first place? In fact, a tumor is just a symptom of something else that has gone terribly wrong inside the body. It's simply the tip of the iceberg.
If you understand that surgery removes the tip of the iceberg, doesn't cure the cancer, have them take whatever tumor they want to take. If you then understand that they want to give you more treatment, like chemo or radiation, why? Because they couldn't get it all, and they can't remove cancer by cutting a piece.
By completely ignoring what caused the tumor, mainstream medicine leaves the fox in the henhouse, and he'll strike again. Don't you think it's more than a little strange that we're trying to cure cancer with cancer-causing treatments? Don't you think it's also strange that although surgery, chemo, and radiation are only effective in a very small number of cases, we use these treatments on the vast majority of patients? Have you ever wondered why these are the only main types of cancer treatments in this country? To understand how this situation developed, we have to briefly look at medicine back in the early 1900s. At that time, doctors were poor, had a low social standing, and, as a profession, had the highest rate of suicide. There were two opposing approaches to medicine, homeopathic and allopathic. Homeopaths practiced a natural, non-toxic therapy designed to boost the body's own healing powers, whereas allopaths were known for using toxic, unnatural treatments and trying to effect a cure. One of the best-known allopathic treatments was bloodletting, which had been practiced for centuries. One of the more famous cases involved George Washington, who had come down with a bad sore throat one night. To help relieve George of his symptoms, his doctors drained half the blood in his body during the course of the night. That didn't help, so they had George swallow 650 milligrams of mercury, giving him, in effect, a fatal dose of heavy metal poisoning. George Washington died the next day. He was killed by some of the best allopathic doctors in the country, who were treating a case of strep throat. By 1900, much of the public had had enough of these unnatural treatments, and homeopaths were stealing patients away from allopaths at an alarming rate. Around this time, the American Medical Association was formed as a doctors' union to counter the growing power of homeopaths. As a prominent member of the AMA stated, "We have never fought the homeopath on matters of principle. We fought him because he came into our community and got the business." The AMA set out to destroy homeopaths and other competitors. They began branding them as quacks while harassing and slandering them. Backed by big business, which smelled money in allopathic treatments, allopaths were able to change medical school curriculums, graduation requirements, and licensing laws to favor allopaths and drive out any competition. The allopaths emerged as the victors, not because they had better medicine, but because they had made alliances with key business interests, which saw that fortunes could be made with new emerging allopathic medical practices. The development of anesthesia and infection control meant a boon to surgery, and financial interests started investing in hospitals and medical schools. The advent of synthetic drugs meant fortunes could be made because, unlike natural remedies, synthetic drugs could be patented, which brought investors flocking into the pharmaceutical field. Anxious to capitalize on this, the AMA was quick to grant its seal of approval to any drug that was advertised in the AMA Journal. As a result, their advertising revenues soared. Coupled with ads from the tobacco industry, the AMA Journal soon became the most profitable publication in the world. In other words, conventional allopathic medicine's rise to power was due to the drug and tobacco money behind their medicine, not the patients they could heal. And it was profits, not proven medical benefits, that was behind the adoption and widespread use of surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy treatments for cancer. In order to police their marketplace, anyone who tried to practice any non-allopathic form of cancer treatment was quickly branded a quack and put out of business. During the course of the last century, the AMA, aided by the Federal Drug Administration and others, closed down hundreds of facilities which were using promising but non-allopathic cancer treatments. In fact, several treatments had cured thousands of patients. These were well documented, with reputable doctors confirming both the cancers and the cures. In the case against Dr. Max Gerson's nutritional treatments of cancer, Morris Fishbein, the head of the AMA, attacked Gerson for treating cancer patients with diet and warning them against cigarettes. Gerson had written extensive papers on his cancer therapy, which were published in the best European medical journals, but he was blackballed in the US, and only one of his papers was published.
One paper, his first paper, was published, okay, and thereupon the pharmaceutical, especially the medical journals and the medical outfits, blackballed him. And we had word from one of the publishers of a prestigious American medical journal who said, Dr. Gerson, your papers are wonderful, we would love to publish them, but we have been warned by the AMA, if we publish any of your material ever again, no licensed physician will ever contribute to our journal again, which is the end. So he couldn't publish anymore. He would get phone calls. This was never in writing. He would get phone calls from other doctors, and they would go something like this. Well, Dr. Gerson, we know you cure cancer, but what would we do with all our expensive equipment and all our expensively trained surgeons and doctors and nurses? What would we do with them? We throw them in the Hudson just when we give them fruits and vegetable juices? We can't do that. There's no money in it.
Gerson got as far as presenting 5 terminal cases that were completely cured of cancer to a Senate subcommittee. The proposal to support Gerson's research was narrowly defeated after heavy pressure from the medical lobby, particularly the AMA. So the American Cancer Society can condemn the Gerson therapy, yet they have never investigated it.
Correct. What they do, though, they claim that they have. They claim that they have in their records, you know, and they footnote it and so on, report from so-and-so. For the freedom of information, we requested that report. It doesn't exist. They're lying, as usual. They're lying. They don't have a report. They don't have an investigation. They claim they do. In journals by the AMA, they too claim that they have investigated Gerson patients, and they, on the contrary, were in pitiful states of malnutrition, right? That's all they say about the Gerson therapy. And we asked for that report under the Freedom of Information Act, and they simply told us it doesn't exist. There is no such report. But they won't tell you or anybody else who is inquiring. For years and years, we've had public invitation to any doctor who wishes to come and wishes to examine the records. They're welcome.
The laboratories used by Dr. Gerson were threatened with economic ruin if they continued to provide services for him, and even attempts against his life were made. Gerson cured Albert Schweitzer's wife of tuberculosis after conventional treatments had failed. Gerson also cured the Nobel Prize winner of his own type 2 diabetes. This is what Albert Schweitzer said about Max Gerson. I see in Dr. Gerson one of the most eminent geniuses in the history of medicine. Max Gerson was good enough for Albert Schweitzer, but not good enough for American allopathic medicine, which shut down the Gerson Clinic and forced it to flee to Mexico. Another case was Harry Hoxsey. Some officials in the AMA and FDA admitted the Hoxsey treatment, which was concentrated antioxidants from plants, could cure some forms of cancer. A federal judge ruled Hoxsey's therapy was comparable to surgery, radium, and X-ray in its effectiveness without the destructive side effects of those treatments. Judge W.L. Thornton ruled, I am of the firm opinion and belief that Hoxsey has cured these people of cancer. Hoxsey has been done a great injustice, and articles and utterances by defendant Morris Fishbein were false, slanderous, and libelous. But Hoxsey represented a threat to the allopaths, so the AMA first tried to buy him out. When that failed, they brought in the FDA and shut down his facilities, forcing the operation to also flee to Mexico. Gerson and Hoxsey are just 2 early examples of promising cancer treatments that were forced out of business, indeed out of the country, because their natural treatments threatened the cancer industry. Since then, hundreds of promising cures have met the same fate. The war against quackery was not intended to eliminate incompetent doctors, but to eliminate alternative treatments in order to dominate the marketplace. In a federal report to Congress, the AMA, National Cancer Institute, and the FDA were charged with organizing a conspiracy to suppress a fair, unbiased assessment of Harry Hoxsey's treatments. And to date, there has never been a fair and unbiased assessment of alternative treatments for cancer. The assessments that have been done were all rigged to guarantee failure. Morris Fishbein was the AMA's most zealous quackbuster. Fishbein originally wanted to be a clown, but instead decided to attend medical school. His definition of a quack was someone who pretends to medical skills he does not possess. Given the fact Fishbein failed anatomy in medical school, never completed his internship, and never practiced a day of medicine or treated a single patient in his entire career, Fishbein himself turns out to be the ultimate quack, and by his own definition. Since it was founded, the AMA's unspoken mission has been to eliminate competition to conventional allopathic medicine. So it comes as no surprise that it has been sued 4 times for antitrust violation. In one case, the AMA's goal was to completely eliminate the chiropractic profession, despite the fact that for over 40 years the AMA itself had shown that chiropractic was effective. The AMA was convicted in federal court, along with the American College of Surgeons and the American College of Radiologists. The author of the book, The 100-Year Lie, relates how he suffered a very painful back injury. He was rushed into the hospital, put on a morphine drip, X-rayed and given a prescription for strong narcotic drugs. The visit to the emergency room cost him $700. On the way to the pharmacy, he happened across a chiropractor's office and decided to go in. After half an hour, his pain was completely gone and has never returned. The session cost him just $55. This is the same profession the AMA was trying to destroy. As Chester Wilk has said, if there is ever an organization that deserves a congressional investigation for dishonesty and fraud, it is the American Medical Association. The AMA was not alone in suppressing cancer treatments, as it had powerful assistance from other players in the cancer industry. The American Cancer Society was formed with the backing of John D. Rockefeller, and it has functioned as a mouthpiece for the cancer industry, not the public, ever since. The American Cancer Society's mission statement says they are dedicated to eliminating cancer as a major health problem. The Chronicle of Philanthropy reports, however, that the ACS is more interested in accumulating wealth than in saving lives. The ACS, in fact, is the wealthiest nonprofit in the world, with net assets over $1 billion. Not surprisingly, it has consistently been given the lowest rankings in charity evaluations. Despite this wealth, its aggressive fundraising campaign pleads poverty and laments the lack of available money for cancer research. Aside from high salaries and overhead, most of what is left in the ACS budget goes into research that directly benefits pharmaceutical and radiological companies. That early detection is almost the sole mission of the ACS should come as no surprise, since the mammography industry has infiltrated every nook and cranny in the ACS, and 5 radiologists have served as ACS presidents. For an organization supposedly fighting cancer, the ACS has adopted some strange positions in the past. Here are a few examples. Now, why would an organization supposedly fighting cancer support such positions? Because it has conflicts of interest. Members of ACS boards have included representatives from herbicide, chemical, fertilizer, and pesticide manufacturers, as well as other industries that buy off the ACS with money while polluting the environment with cancer-causing chemicals. The maker of the world's top-selling breast cancer drug, tamoxifen, has been the sole funder of the National Breast Cancer Awareness Month for years. This drug company is a spin-off of one of the world's largest producers of pesticides and other industrial chemicals, including those linked to breast cancer. Judged by its history, the ACS's mission is to raise money that will ultimately benefit the pharmaceutical and mammography industries, as well as opposing regulations that would ban chemical carcinogens. Cancer is big business, and the ACS's main role from the time it was formed by the Rockefeller Group is to support private industry, not patients. The FDA is the enforcement arm of the cancer industry. It passes regulations that favor the industry and shuts down any form of unconventional treatments that would threaten industry profits. It has a revolving door with the drug industry, as officials change places on a regular basis. FDA testing protocols are often set by the drug companies themselves and then adopted by the FDA. This is because half of the FDA's funding comes directly from the drug companies it is supposed to regulate. Here is one of the FDA's regulations that was obviously designed by the drug industry. Only a drug can cure, prevent, or treat a disease. By this regulation, natural substances cannot cure diseases because only drugs can do that. To look at it another way, only unnatural allopathic substances can cure diseases. And if you claim a natural substance can cure a disease, the FDA can and will shut you down. Although the FDA has approved over 40 highly toxic patented cancer drugs, it has yet to approve a single non-toxic cancer therapy. Why? Because natural cancer therapies are not profitable because they cannot be patented. In other words, only profitable treatments can cure cancer. In fact, only profitable treatments can cure any disease. When natural treatments score solid cancer successes and show promise, they are seen as competition and are dismissed as dubious quackery. Phony tests that are rigged to fail are conducted, and these non-toxic treatments are then shown to be worthless. When an extremely toxic but potentially profitable drug can show only marginal rates of success, it will get FDA approval and easily enter the realm of acceptable treatments. Here are the major players in the cancer industry. At the top are businesses that have an interest in making profits from cancer. The players below are there to support and maintain these businesses. The cancer industry buys off politicians through campaign financing. In turn, politicians pass legislation favorable to the cancer industry, while exerting influence on the FDA, which passes regulations favorable to the cancer industry. Research funded by public money is also handed over to the pharmaceutical companies at no cost. And personnel shuffle between private firms and the government to make sure the cancer industry is well served. Every dollar that flows from the top down is repaid many times over in legislative, regulatory, and research benefits for the cancer industry. This is the result of the marriage between allopathic medicine and business early in the last century that has resulted in the corporate takeover of medicine. As a result, the war on cancer is focused on lucrative treatments that generate billions in corporate revenue, while lip service is being given to prevention. The primary mission of the ACS is to encourage people to get early screening. This gets them into the system sooner and generates more revenue for the cancer industry. Early detection, in other words, is simply a recruitment tool. Each patient is worth, on average, $500,000 to the industry, and the goal is to convert patients into long-term profit centers. This is why surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy are grossly overused, despite their ineffectiveness. And the cancer industry justifies it by the use of deceptive rubber numbers. The American Cancer Society and other players know the difference between relative and absolute numbers, and they should be ashamed of themselves for deliberately deceiving the American public that supports them. Instead of ensuring that the best cancer therapies are available for the American public, the cancer industry has accomplished just the opposite. They have limited the choice of cancer therapies to the worst and most dangerous treatments ever to visit the human body. And they have made any other treatment illegal. If you look at Okinawans, who are one of the oldest populations in the world, their cancer rates are extremely low compared to ours. But if they migrate to the US and adopt our diet and lifestyle, they soon have the same rates of cancer that Americans do. In other words, getting older is not the reason for our explosion of cancer. Another argument commonly made is that environmental carcinogens are the cause of our cancer epidemic. But that's not true either. The low rates of cancer in Okinawa, for example, cannot be explained by a lack of environmental pollutants, as Okinawa is heavily industrialized and polluted. Don't get me wrong, environmental pollutants can cause cancers. As one author said recently, if we were cannibals, our meat would be banned from human consumption. Yet despite this pollution, only about 5% of our cancers are caused by environmental carcinogens. All you have to do is look at Okinawans, Seventh-day Adventists, or other groups who live among the pollution, yet have very low rates of cancer. Another source of cancer-causing agents is medical radiation. One expert has estimated that 75% of the incidence of breast cancer is caused from medical radiation. And although mammograms and other sources of radiation do contribute to breast cancer, they are not the primary cause. Why? The explosion in breast cancer started long before the widespread use of mammography. Some people also like to blame cancer on genetics, but genetics accounts for a small percentage of all cancers, only about 2%. Except for this small number, what the vast majority of us are inheriting from our families are bad habits, not bad genes.
I'm Italian. My family, what runs in my family are strokes, heart attacks, high cholesterol. Well, that's not what runs my family. What runs in my family is eating pasta, bread, brajol, sausages, and meatballs. That's what runs in my family.
You're neither doomed by a bad gene or saved by good ones. You can have a bad gene, but it does not mean it will become active, because most bad genes are not active unless the right conditions appear in the body. When this happens, they wake up and cause trouble. And most of these awakenings are the result of diet and lifestyle.
There is a genetic propensity to all diseases, but most people wouldn't realize their genetic propensity if they didn't stress their genes with unhealthy habits. Like, for example, some families, people get lung cancer when they smoke. You know, in other families, they get emphysema. So our lung cancer and emphysema in smokers due to genetics. You step back and you say, of course not, they're due to this stupid habit of smoking. And it's the same thing with cancer and heart disease and diabetes. Yes, you have some genetic strengths and weaknesses that you present to life. And when you do things to yourself, like smoke or drink alcohol or eat rich foods, those genetic strengths and weaknesses may express themselves. But if you never did that, you'd never find out whether you had a tendency to breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, diabetes. You would never find out those things because those problems do not occur in populations of people who eat a diet based on starches, vegetables, and fruits. You just don't see prostate cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer. Nobody has them. You know, hundreds of millions of people, nobody has them.
Since bad genes awaken due to changes in the body's environment, you can put them back to sleep with changes in diet and lifestyle. It's been shown, for example, that women carrying the mutated BRCA1 gene can reduce their risk of breast cancer up to 65% by simply losing weight. In fact, there are many other ways that women can greatly reduce their risk of activating bad genes through simple diet and lifestyle changes.
So even though you have the genetic predisposition, lifestyle will dampen that completely, and the gene does not have to manifest.
What do you think about healthy women getting preventive mastectomies in order to avoid breast cancer?
You know, it's almost I find it hard to even talk about because it's absurd. You know that, anyway, that would be like saying everyone, as soon as you finish your periods, you go in and get all your ovaries and your uterus is out, and men should have their prostates removed. I mean, that's not the problem.
What a strong family history suggests is a history of bad diet and lifestyle that awakens this gene.
All of us, I'm sure, we have a few genes that we'd rather not have. Either because we were born with them or because they were corrupted during our lifetimes by being exposed to certain agents. So we got a few genes there that could cause us problems. And they do cause problems if we continue to fertilize those genes. In other words, going from the genes to the disease is a long process. RNA, protein, enzyme, so forth. That's a long process there. That's the expression period. That's where nutrition operates. Protein and other nutrients are working together. They actually control the expression of mischievous genes, I say. Genes that might give rise to cancer, genes that might give rise to heart disease, genes that might do this, that, or something else. And we all got some of these kind of genes, that raise our vulnerability to those kinds of diseases. If we accept the idea that we've all got some genes that that might cause us some difficulties, if in turn we then turn around and don't fertilize those genes, with the wrong kinds of nutrients, wrong kinds of foods, we're okay. We can keep them under control.
Why do Japanese smokers have the highest per capita consumption of cigarettes in the world, and yet the lowest rate of lung cancer in the world? Why has cigarette consumption dropped sharply in the U.S., yet the incidence of lung cancer has not?
Men now are smoking only about half the rate they were. That started some 20, 30 years ago. If smoking causes cancer, and only half the people are now smoking as they used to do, then therefore, this leading cause of cancer, that rates ought to be about half, right? And you would expect, even with the other source still creeping up, that lung cancer chunk alone ought to be dropping at more than one case out of 200. It's not. The numbers they don't square up.
Why do a large percentage of lung cancers occur in people who never smoked? Why do we now have an epidemic of skin cancers, yet we spend most of our time indoors? Why was skin cancer uncommon before 1900 when most people were outdoors? Why are the highest rates of melanoma found in people who spend most of their time indoors? What these simple facts suggest is that something else is going on with cancer, something our current medical model does not explain, and in fact chooses to deliberately ignore. Only when you look at diet and lifestyle can we explain all the seeming contradictions with cancer, particularly the rise in the consumption of animal and refined foods, along with the corresponding decline in the consumption of whole plant foods. Throughout most of human history, whole plant foods were, on average, 95% of the human diet worldwide. Today, whole plant foods are just 7% of our diet. In other words, industrialized countries have turned the human diet upside down. It should be obvious that cancer would follow this radical change in diet. Here is a brief summary of the differences between plant foods, animal foods, and refined foods. When you look at the plant food column, every item fights cancer. Animal and refined foods, on the other hand, promote cancers. Most people will accept the notion that eating a diet high in plant foods will prevent most cancers. These same people, however, find it difficult to believe that you can actually reverse cancer by adopting a plant-based diet. In this sense, it's useful to think about Nathan Pritikin, who was the first person to prove that heart disease can be reversed with a plant-based diet. At the time, mainstream medicine said this was simply impossible. And after he reversed his heart disease, he was greeted with 20 years of skepticism and doubt by the medical community. So much so that he willed that his body be autopsied and the results published in a medical journal, which they were. His arteries were as clean as a teenager's. Through the work of doctors Dean Ornish, Caldwell Esselstyn, and others, it has now been proven 1,000 times over that Nathan Pritikin's heart disease reversal was not a spontaneous remission, but the result of adopting a plant-based diet. Yet despite this overwhelming evidence, hospitals have not switched to diet as the primary method of treating heart disease. Why? There's simply no money in it. Instead, conventional medicine continues to treat the symptoms of heart disease with ineffective stents, statin drugs, and bypass surgeries, all of which bypass the cause of the problem. Another case of treating symptoms is adult-onset diabetes. The American Diabetes Association will tell you there is no cure for adult-onset diabetes, which simply means there is no drug that will cure the disease. And yet, adult-onset diabetes is easily and quickly cured with a change in diet and lifestyle.
So I don't really believe there are any intelligent people in the scientific community that have any doubt that type 2 diabetes is caused by the rich Western diet. I think everybody agrees with that. But what they don't do is they don't take the next step, which is to say, okay, this is the cause of it, so what you ought to do is you ought to change your diet.
They come in and get on this program, and in 24 hours, they have cut their insulin by half. On day number 5 or 6, they don't need insulin at all, ever again. Now that, when you hear about it, I know sometimes you may hear things like this and you think, that's impossible. How could that be true? The doctor says this is incurable. You can't reverse it. It is not true. You can completely heal diabetes, and very, very quickly.
In most cases, 5 to 7 days. We have a few cases that are particularly severe. It might take 2 weeks.
We find in 5 to 7 days someone with type 2 diabetes, if they eat a 100% plant-based diet, uncooked, they're no longer on insulin. I haven't seen that not happen.
So yes, the emphasis on treatment by the American Diabetic Association, by the American Heart Association, by the National Osteoporosis Foundation, and so on, they're all in the wrong direction. But they have a lot of big industry money that keeps them focused in that bad direction too. This didn't just happen by circumstance, by happenstance. This happened because there is an active flow of money that keeps them in the direction of drugs and not in the direction of good diet.
You know, and it's not only cancer, but you don't have people coming with lupus and multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's and chronic fatigue syndrome and schizophrenia and obesity and diabetes and arthritis and osteoporosis and on, all kinds of diseases, not just cancer. People with multiple sclerosis. I mean, some of them have even gone blind from these things, and we have reversed blindness from it. I've had people with MS that were debilitated. I mean, not to even be able to get up and walk on their own, completely healed. Parkinson's patients coming in on day 1, shaking so dramatically that they couldn't even hold their hand out to shake it. By day 10, steady as a rock. Lupus. People come in wheelchairs sometimes. I mean, literally cannot raise their arm enough to feed themselves. And within 10 days, they're up and out of that wheelchair and walking. You know, AIDS and HIV. I've got so many testimonies now. I had one gentleman come. His viral load for AIDS was over 103,000 when he started my program. In 3 months, his viral load had dropped to 3,030. In 9 months, they could not detect the virus in his body, and his T cells had gone all the way back up. So we hear all the time that AIDS is incurable. Well, if it's incurable, then how is it disappearing from the body?
As you'll see, our major cancers can also be healed with diet. Just as drug companies and other vested interests have blocked curing heart disease, diabetes, and virtually all other chronic diseases with diet, they have also done everything they can to discourage using diet to cure cancer. Diet, in fact, is the 800-pound gorilla sitting in our kitchens that is causing virtually all of our major diseases. Yet conventional medicine continues to ignore this gorilla's presence. Since the early 1900s, allopathic medicine has seen any natural cure, such as diet, as a threat to their bag of profitable, toxic treatments. Our bodies cure cancer every day of our lives, and the difference between prevention and reversal is one of degree, not kind. In fact, the average American has 6 bouts with serious cancers during their lifetimes. That is, they actually reversed serious cancers 6 times in their lives without even knowing it. Those with healthy immune systems don't know about the battle their bodies are waging. Those with weakened immune systems will find out about these battles in the hospital. The foundation of a good immune system is diet. A good diet enables us to reverse cancer every day of our lives. Conventional medicine classifies cancer reversals as mysterious, spontaneous regressions. Yet, if you look into people who have made so-called spontaneous regressions, almost all had made major changes to a plant-based diet. According to conventional medicine, the rate of spontaneous remissions is so low, it is essentially zero. And yet, we see cancer reversals all the time in treatment centers which use diet as the basis for cancer reversals. In other words, there are simply too many reversals going on in treatment centers to be spontaneous.
In 1998, I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. The options that I had at the time, she said that it was going to be chemotherapy and followed by a bone marrow transplant. I told her on my own I'm going to do research, and that's what I started doing and came here and did the program. And in 2002, I had a bone marrow aspiration, a biopsy, and I was cancer-free.
When confronted with the evidence of natural cancer reversals, most doctors will go into denial, saying there was a delayed response to conventional treatment, despite the gross ineffectiveness of those treatments. When there was no previous treatment, they will say it was misdiagnosed and not cancer in the first place. When the cancer is proven by surgery or biopsy, they ultimately fall back on this spontaneous regression excuse, all because these cancers do not fall within their medical understanding. And they will never admit to diet having anything to do with cancer reversals, simply because they know nothing about how powerful nutrition can be.
I kept all my records, always got a copy of everything. And some of the doctors that are out there actually said I was misdiagnosed. They will not they would not give credit to the diet. No, he didn't want to hear it. He would ask me on the diet, after 3 months passed, and then, I was noticeably not dying after 3 months, and then 6 months, I didn't die, and I was actually looking better. He would ask me, so what are you doing now? And I would start to tell him, and he'd cut me off and didn't want to hear it.
But other doctors are overcoming their skepticism and are starting to get the message.
My own medical doctor that diagnosed me, he ended up writing the foreword in my book, Living Foods Lifestyle. He sends his patients to my center today, still. I've had many doctors come and take my course after they've had dying patients come to my center that they were convinced would never live, and then they've become intrigued. They usually arrive with their arms folded and, that scowl, they're looking like, I don't believe any of it, and you've got to convince me. And I tell them on day one, I'm not here to try to convince you of anything. I'm going to show you what it is, and you have your own choice. You can believe it or not believe it. I'm not here to try to convince you to think the way that I think. But I ask them, how much nutritional training have you had? And when they really think about it, some of them will say an hour, 2 hours, maybe 3 hours at the most of their entire medical career.
To be honest with you, the amount of nutrition training I receive that I would use today is close to zero, and that's what I'm spending a lot of my time doing, is relearning all of the important nutrition information that's out there. I stumbled across the nutrition aspect, and once I saw how well it worked, I couldn't do anything but follow that path because that's what really helped patients, and I finally saw them get better, which was not only exciting but rewarding. We got into the business to help patients get better, and we can't do that with the tools we were given in medical school.
The underlying fundamental reason behind natural cancer reversals is diet. Pancreatic cancer patients were divided into two groups. The first group made no dietary changes, and 99% were dead within a year. The second group consumed a moderately healthy plant-based diet, and 52% remained alive. Over the course of 6 years, the more vegetables lung cancer patients ate, the longer they lived. The more vegetables colon cancer patients ate, the longer they lived. In 1993, the National Cancer Institute published the results of a study of women who had tested positive for breast cancer. They told half the women to continue with their typical American diets and asked the other half to change to a plant-based diet. After only 4 years, almost 40% of the women who stayed on their typical diets had recurrences of breast cancer. Not a single woman who changed to a plant-based diet had a recurrence of breast cancer. Women who simply ate flaxseed muffins had a reduction in breast tumors equivalent to those taking the toxic drug tamoxifen, and without any side effects. Women who switched to low-fat diets had their estrogen levels drop by up to 50% within a few weeks. Women with early-stage breast cancer who changed to a slightly healthy plant-based diet, combined with exercise, cut their risk of death in half. A change to a plant-based diet reduced the recurrence of cancer by 300% in stage 3 colon cancer patients. A change to a plant-based diet inhibited the growth of prostate cancer cells by almost 8 times compared to the control group. After changing to a full plant-based diet and not receiving conventional treatments, 82% of patients with stage 2 melanoma were alive 5 years after treatment began, compared to just 39% on conventional treatment who did not change their diet. For stage 4 melanoma, 39% were alive after 4 years, compared to just 6% on conventional treatments who did not change their diets. In another study, patients with malignant melanoma who adopted a plant-based diet in stages 1 and 2 had a 100% survival after 5 years. For those who adopted the diet in stage 3, there was a 71% survival. For stage 4, there was a 39% survival after 5 years. The median survival time for men with prostate cancer is just 6 years following conventional treatment. For those who rejected conventional treatment and went on a plant-based diet, they were all alive after 19 years. A woman with ovarian cancer wanted to compare conventional therapy outcomes to the Gerson therapy.
And they asked the doctor to give her some names and addresses of his former patients. He gave her 20 names, 18 of which had died. Then she asked the same thing of the Gerson Institute, the Gerson Hospital. They gave her 20 names of terminally ill patients, 18 of which were alive and well and answered and were fine, 2 of which had died.
Without any medical interventions, without any alternative interventions, without any supplements, without anything like that, here's a woman with a stage 3 cancer that was completely healed within 6 months.
In other words, when the outcomes of diets designed to fight cancer are compared to conventional treatments, those diets beat the pants off surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation.
What I find interesting is that many of the conventional allopathic physicians and or their spouses come to us and say, please don't say anything. Please let's keep this secret. I don't want my colleagues to know that we're going this route.
Hi, we're taking one.
Americans practically worship animal protein, yet it is the strongest carcinogen we will ever encounter in our lives. This is not something that has been recently discovered. It's something that has been ignored due to our obsession with eating meat. In the 1960s, researchers in India thought by increasing animal protein, it would help cure cancer. What they found was just the opposite. In 100% of the cases, increasing the consumption of animal protein caused cancer. During the 1980s, Dr. Robert Good discovered that mice that were fed a lower protein diet had fewer cancers. He confirmed this by studying the low protein diets of Aborigines in Australia, who had extremely low rates of cancer. T. Colin Campbell has also confirmed the protein-cancer connection, but with more precision and depth. Like the researchers in India, he injected rats with a powerful carcinogen to induce liver cancer. When they were fed a 20% animal protein diet, 100% of them developed cancer. When they were fed a 5% protein diet, none of them developed cancer, despite the presence of the carcinogen.
Where those researchers, also interested in liver cancer, were feeding rats 2 different levels of protein, with the idea that the higher levels of protein might help to prevent the development of that kind of cancer. And what they saw and what they reported was exactly the reverse. The higher levels of protein, I would call the normal levels, all those animals got liver cancer when they were exposed to a carcinogen. The animals that fed the lower levels of protein did not. And so all of a sudden, and it was like 100, nothing score. I mean, all the animals in the group fed the higher levels of protein got cancer, and none in the lower level.
Dr. Campbell found that cancer could even be turned on and then turned off by varying the level of animal protein in the diet.
We could actually turn on and turn off cancer just by giving them protein or taking it away.
It was also found that casein, the primary protein in all dairy products, was the most aggressive cancer promoter of all. In contrast, when the animals were fed a diet of 20% vegetable protein, none of them developed cancer, despite the presence of the carcinogen. Cancer was only triggered with animal protein. In further experiments, they found that regardless of how many carcinogens entered the body, the development of cancer was totally dependent on how much animal protein was consumed. In other words, the consumption of animal protein makes us more susceptible to cancer. This is one reason why populations such as the Okinawans and other groups who eat plant-based diets have much lower cancer rates. In effect, their plant-based diets form a green light around them, protecting them from cancer. Dr. Campbell did further studies to investigate whether nutrients other than protein might promote or reverse cancer. With stunning consistency, nutrients from all animal foods grew tumors, while nutrients from plant foods shrank tumors. In other words, environmental agents are the seeds for cancer. Animal foods are the fertilizers that allow these cancer seeds to grow. How well do these studies translate into human terms?
The biochemistry that operates to cause cancer, let's say in an experimental animal, is essentially the same kind of biochemistry operating in humans.
Dr. Campbell had a unique opportunity to test these findings as he directed the largest nutritional study ever conducted in human history. His conclusion? Differences in cancer rates corresponded directly to differences in the amount of animal protein consumed. The more animal protein, the more cancer.
That as soon as small amounts of animal-based foods began to appear in certain diets in China, that's when Western diseases began to appear. Even putting reasonably small amounts of animal food into the diet, animal protein, of course, would tend to elevate blood cholesterol levels that lead to heart disease, would tend to associate with emerging increases in cancer risk. And so the China study became then quite interesting and exciting, the results, but primarily in the context of what went on before. Had we done the China project alone and only the China project, I'm not sure I'd be sitting here telling the same kind of story, because it was somewhat limited, in terms of establishing, of course, cause and effect relationships. And as we started to investigate that question, how does protein cause cancer? And we looked at a variety of different kinds of things, and every time we looked for a mechanism, we found one. In my way of thinking, that was probably one of the most important observations I think I made during the last 50 years, because it turns out that when you got these relationships between causes and effects, they operate through a whole symphony of reactions, all highly integrated and working in ways in which, the response is produced. And so that begins to challenge in a major way the way we think about nutrition, the way we think about health, and especially the way we think about medical practice. It's sort of like the body saying, okay, I need protein, but don't give me more than I need. Especially don't give me the protein coming from other animals. What I was interested in those kind of studies was to learn something about principles. Because what I was beginning to see were things that were challenging fundamental assumptions and fundamental principles. I mean, one of which is, for example, can cancer really be reversed? Can it be reversed by just simply altering nutrient intake? That's something that was unheard of. Starting out believing that animal protein was the greatest food, was food from heaven or whatever, and finding out it's the problem, not the solution. And it's the one that's been ignored. Everybody talks about vitamins and minerals and fat and fiber and so forth and so on. But the nutrient that has driven the debate, has driven our practice, has driven everything, more than any other thing, is basically our reverence for animal protein. Either directly or indirectly, our assumptions about medicine and healthcare really can be traced to that awesome reverence for that nutrient. It tends to increase the activity of a really important enzyme called the mixed function oxidase. It's in the liver. It converts a normal cell to a cancer cell. Just the protein can do that. That's one thing. It does many, many things. It tends to impair the immune system. Specifically, we found, for example, that it impaired the activity of these so-called natural killer cells. The animal protein will tend to increase estrogen and hormone levels. That in turn might be associated with breast cancer. It modulates energy relationships. I mean, the animal protein itself does a whole bunch of different things that all tend to converge in the same direction to actually create more cancer. The combination of all these things working together, of which there are incidentally countless things, I mean hundreds of thousands of probably different kinds of chemicals in food that can operate together like this, and they're working as a symphony. And the final effect is either health or disease, depending on whether you're working with the wrong stuff or the right stuff.
Another reason why animal protein causes cancer has to do with digestive enzymes, or a shortage of them. Cancer cells have a protective protein coating around them, which makes them invisible to the immune system. The pancreas produces 2 enzymes necessary to digest animal protein. In addition to digesting animal protein, only these enzymes can dissolve the protein coating around cancer cells, which makes them visible to the immune system so they can then be destroyed. Animal protein requires a lot of enzymes to digest it, and eating a diet high in animal protein can actually cause a shortage of pancreatic enzymes. When this happens, cancer cells will keep their protective protein coating and remain invisible to the immune system and start multiplying. In contrast, pancreatic enzymes are not necessary to digest vegetable protein, so you can eat as much vegetable protein as you want, and the supply of enzymes available to unmask cancer cells will remain plentiful. Successful cancer therapies are now being used based on expensive pancreatic enzyme supplementation, although it's much easier and cheaper to simply change your diet. These findings fit together with Dr. Campbell's findings. Animal protein promotes cancer, and vegetable protein does not. They also agree with thousands of studies linking animal foods with cancer. What's amazing is that it has taken all these studies to confirm what was obvious to observers in the late 1800s. The reason Japanese smokers had low rates of lung cancer is because their plant-based diets protected them by not allowing the cancer to be promoted. But as their diets changed and their consumption of animals increased, their rates of lung cancer increased correspondingly.
Japanese smoke. To this day, you can go in, or I haven't been there in a few years, but until recently you could go into a bank and they were smoking. But their incidence of lung cancer was way lower than expected. As soon as the Western diet was introduced, lung cancer went up. Well, do hamburgers cause lung cancer? No. But if you've planted the seed with tobacco smoke, the eating of the animal products will increase it. It's like fertilizer. So we find that the people who remain on a closer to a plant-based diet are the ones who have the least amount of cancer. If we look at Micronesia, Indonesia, the Philippines, and we look at people that have this much animal intake, have this much heart disease, this much cancer. You go to the U.S., Germany, or Great Britain, they have this much animal intake, they have this much heart disease, this much cancer.
The reason we have an epidemic of skin cancers today is not because of sun exposure, but because our diets allow the initiation and promotion of skin cancer.
Skin cancer, incidentally, is also a dietary thing. A lot of the DNA damage that we experience from time to time, whether it's from sunshine or chemicals or whatever, that kind of damage automatically, in most cases, gets repaired. But it's not a 100% repair process. A little escapes repair, and so we leave behind a little residue that we don't want. And it turns out the diet, again, affects that repair process.
We don't have to look at studies to see how powerful diet can be in protecting us from cancer. We can look at people who have battled and then reversed cancer with a change in diet. Take the story of Meg Wolf. As documented in her book, it was discovered she had a malignant tumor in her leg. The treatment? They amputated her leg and put her on a regimen of drugs. A few years later, the cancer showed up in her thyroid. The treatment? They removed half her thyroid and put her on a regimen of new drugs. A few years later, the cancer spread to her breast and lymph nodes. The treatment? They amputated her breasts, put her on a regimen of new drugs, chemotherapy, and radiation. None of these treatments worked. They caused horrific side effects, and she was told to prepare for death. As her doctors were pronouncing her terminal, she discovered macrobiotics, a plant-based diet composed largely of brown rice and vegetables. After stopping the toxic treatments and switching to macrobiotics, her body started to recover until she was completely healed of cancer. Conventional medicine had missed the point. While they were amputating body parts and treating the symptoms of cancer, they completely ignored what was causing the cancer in the first place and left a ticking time bomb inside her body.
The body is born with an amazing self-healing ability. It has a complex matrix of systems that basically work really well as long as you give it what it needs. Out of every 1,000 calls we get, most of them are from people that have been diagnosed with cancer. We have people calling us all the time who have been told they're going to die in a few months, and they're not crying. They're joking with us on the phone. They say, I'm going to beat this. They're saying, I want to come and learn what I can do to support my recovery. And those are the people it's going to work for. I'll tell you the story of Elaine Nussbaum, who wrote a wonderful book on her own recovery from cancer. It's called Recovery from Cancer. She had uterine cancer, which metastasized to the bones throughout her body. In fact, she was in a body cast. And she was going downhill and downhill, was given a short time to live when someone told her about macrobiotics. We were able to supply 6 cases of metastatic cancer who had all not been given hope with medical means, stopped the medicine, started macrobiotics, and fully recovered. These were cases of pancreatic cancer, uterine metastasized to the bones, malignant melanoma, metastasized to the colon, all terminal cases. They all recovered.
I came from a diet, a very gourmet European diet. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. I started taking steroids for that. I was diagnosed with the fibromyalgia. I would have pneumonia at least once, if not twice a year. Chronic fatigue and lupus. Basically tested positive for all autoimmune disorders. After this had gone on for about 8 months, 9 months, I ended up in bed. I could not move at that point. I needed assistance to do just regular daily living. By the time I was 34, I was in massive pain all over my body. I got to a point where I couldn't shower because I was in so much pain. The water would actually physically hurt me. And they biopsied it and found out that I actually did have cancer. And they thought that it was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And they wanted to stage me. So they did a bone marrow tap. And after they had done that, and I went back to see the oncologist, she told me that I was stage 4, that it was in my bone marrow, and within 3 months I would be dead. My oncologist told me that if I didn't do any kind of cancer treatments, she would not put me on disability. So I was not put on disability. I met a friend who started coming to my house and making me macrobiotic meals. And within 6 days, after being in bed for 9 months, after 6 days I was able to get up and I took my first shower. It was the only thing I'd ever done that actually made me feel better instead of worse.
Dr. Jane Plant was struck by breast cancer. She had a radical mastectomy, 3 further operations, 40 radiation treatments, and 12 chemotherapy treatments. None of these treatments worked. The cancer kept coming back, not just once or twice, but 5 times, and to different parts of her body. The last tumor was on her neck, and chemo was not effective. She then adopted a plant-based diet and specifically eliminated all dairy products. Within days, the lump started to soften and shrink. Within 6 weeks, the tumor was completely gone. She had cured herself of the disease.
In 1999, in February, I was diagnosed with both breast and cervical cancer. My doctor told me I would die in 6 months to a year at the maximum. And then the doctor immediately said that I had to have surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation. But I refused those treatments because I had family members, my mother, all of my aunts on my mother's side, and my one aunt on my dad's side had all had either breast, cervical, uterine, or ovarian cancer, and they had done surgery and chemotherapy and radiation, and either the treatments killed them or their cancers came back with a vengeance, and it was very horrific in watching what happened to them. I was prepared to do anything other than that, meaning the surgery, the chemo, and the radiation. The lump that was in my breast was about the size of $0.50. In 1 month, it was about the size of a dime. That's how dramatically it shrunk. The bleeding that I'd had from the cervical tumors that had been really, really strong and going for quite a while, in 30 days, it was completely stopped.
Brenda now helps terminally ill cancer patients, as well as people with a wide spectrum of diseases.
I've had lots of terminal, hopeless, incurable. This is what they tell me. They come and they say, I hear stories like this. The doctor says that what I have is untreatable, that there really isn't anything that they can do for it, and that all that they can do now is to manage my pain. I have people that say the doctor has said I only have a few months or a few weeks. So I get a lot of those people. And I have seen people that have come back from brain cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, melanomas, and every other type of cancer.
One of Brenda's clients was Elizabeth Capadia.
And they sent me for an MRI, and I had a tumor on my pancreas. They gave me a chance of a 50-50 chance of living with the operation. They're going to take the pancreas out, and they told me that they would probably the gallbladder was bad, and they would take the gallbladder out as well.
After attending Brenda's program, she went back to the doctor for another MRI.
But I said I need it because I did a nutritional change, and so they finally said okay, and they sent me to for another MRI, and the tumor was completely gone.
She said, Brenda, I went back to the doctor. She said, they've had me come back in 4 times. They've retested me again and again because, believe it or not, they cannot find cancer anywhere in my body.
There are thousands of well-documented biopsy-proven cases of cancer reversals due to diet. Here is a list of some of the cancers that have been healed naturally. People in the cancer industry, as well as the general public, are looking for a magic bullet drug that will miraculously cure cancer. The latest research frontier is cancer vaccines. Every vaccine out there is based on stimulating your immune system, which is impaired because of our lousy diets. You don't have to wait for an expensive vaccine. You can accomplish the same thing and vaccinate your body by getting real medicine from real foods that will put a green light around your body. We also read in the news about so-called superfoods for fighting cancer. Blueberries fight this type of cancer, curry fights that type of cancer, a chemical in raspberries causes certain cancer cells to commit suicide, and so forth. These are nutritional magic bullets, but they won't work unless the rest of your diet is designed to fight cancer. A few berries on top of your cheesecake won't make a dent against cancer. It is not this food or that food, but your entire nutrient profile that is going to fight cancer. the hundreds of thousands of chemical reactions the body has with the food it encounters. If all those reactions are going in the right direction, you can beat cancer with diet. In order for cancer to survive in your body, it needs the right environment, and that is primarily determined by what you put into your mouth. Please visit our website, where we have references to clinics, books, and other resources that have helped people reverse cancers naturally. What these programs do is nothing short of a blood transfusion that floods your body with nutrients it has literally been dying for. If you have cancer, I would highly recommend you visit a clinic that has a successful track record reversing cancers using diet and lifestyle changes. They have specialized programs and can tailor a diet to your individual needs, as well as provide the support most people need. When you consider that almost all of their patients have already been devastated by conventional treatments and been sent home to die, their records with cancer reversals are nothing short of miraculous. To be sure, you will not get these dietary guidelines from the cancer industry, because they, admittedly, do not know how to prevent, much less reverse, cancer. There are a number of clinics in the U.S. and throughout the world which offer concentrated natural supplementation, such as intravenous vitamin C, pancreatic enzyme therapy, Laetrile, and a host of other treatments. Many of these treatments have been successful in helping to reverse cancers and may be worth your investigation. But no matter how natural or how successful such supplementation may be, none will be successful in the long term unless you attack the root cause of cancer by changing your diet and lifestyle.
It does not heal cancer. It does not restore the body's defenses. It doesn't restore the liver and the immune system and the enzyme system and the pancreatic enzymes. It doesn't restore. It can help the body fight cancer, but it doesn't heal.
I would advise that you stay away from any non-natural synthetic supplementation. 1,000 milligrams of daily vitamin C in pill form has been shown to reduce the risk of stomach cancer. Yet, just 37 milligrams of natural vitamin C from an orange will lower the risk by twice as much.
Rather than taking pills, is to have someone get a juicer out and make some really healthy green juices. I don't like a lot of sweet juices because they feed the cancer, and we don't really want to do that, so fruit juices are out. But green juices, and you can put a few apples in to make it taste good and a little bit of lemon. There was ways of making it taste delicious. But when you take this much vegetable and you extract the fiber and you've got this much liquid, you couldn't possibly have eaten that much, but you can drink that much. And you're getting not only the phytonutrients and all that, you're getting the enzymes, you're getting things that we have not even discovered about from there. So that's the way we approach supplementation.
Synthetic supplementation throws the body off balance and results in side effects. A recent study, for example, shows that artificial fortification of food with folic acid greatly increases the risk of colon cancer. The take-home lesson: get your folic acid and other nutrients from foods in their natural packages, because they are far more powerful than synthetic substitutes. I know of people who have had successful supplementation treatments. Because of the success, they went back to eating a typical American diet. Guess what? Their cancers returned with their bad diet, despite the supplementation. Magic bullets, natural or not, will only go so far. They may be good at providing a temporary fix, but if you want the cancer to go away for the rest of your life, you have to stick to the fundamentals.
Fundamental therapy is really number one, and that is, how do we stop making cancer? Because it doesn't matter how good you are at getting rid of it, if it's not going to stay gone, then you haven't done anything. If you're diagnosed with cancer, realize something. That the person that diagnosed you has cancer, and probably everyone in your family has cancer, and we all have cancer. Getting cancer should not be a surprise to anyone. Will you survive it? And yes, it is survivable. It's survivable by reversing the conditions that brought it on. If you had an aquarium and the fish were sick, the veterinarian would not say, bring me fish, he'd say, bring me a cup of the water, and I'll tell you what's wrong with the fish. And if you had a garden and it was failing, the first thing you would look at is the soil. Well, we have a soil, and we're the gardeners, and we will have a harvest. I tell them that my job is to try to selectively target and kill the cancer as best I can, and enhance your immune system as best I can. But your job is to stop making cancer. We change our body every 8 months, so if I have cancer now and I had it 8 months ago, it's because I'm continuing to make it. When I have two people, same particular type of cancer, same stage, the one who embraces the lifestyle changes, and I mean embraces it, is happy, not as doing it as a burden. Oh, I've got to eat this way. But the person who says, like, wow, what an opportunity this is. That person I have on, the other one who has absolutely rejected it, guess which one's still alive?
Attitude can play a large role, not only in healing cancer, but any disease. An example of just how powerful attitude can be is illustrated by the woman who was given a chemotherapy placebo and her hair fell out. Conversely, many cancers have been cured because of the placebo effect. In fact, some have said that those few who recover under the destructive medicines of chemotherapy and radiation have largely the placebo effect to thank. An angry, stressed, or depressed mind can greatly suppress the immune system and allow cancer to grow. In one study, it was found that depression doubled the risk of cancer. Attitude is not only important with cancer, but with any disease. Norman Cousins was diagnosed with a deadly, incurable disease. Instead of doctors, he turned to the Marx Brothers and laughed himself to health, because laughter stimulates the immune system better than any drug on the planet. Dr. Anthony Satellaro, who reversed his terminal prostate cancer with diet, was very skeptical because of his training as a medical doctor. However, he kept his mind open that diet might work, and that is all you have to do. Most importantly, you have to shift your thinking from being a helpless victim to being someone who is willing to take charge of their own health.
I believe that anyone who has a willingness and the initiative deep down in their own heart to heal themselves can do it. It is never too late. What we tell people here is that we have never healed a person in 51 years. Not because we're frightened to say that, because it's true. People heal themselves. We are cheerleaders. We encourage them. We have massive experience, and we can guide them with this experience. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they're at home alone, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, apt to heal or not to heal themselves. So we've seen so many of these people have the courage to heal themselves in spite of the fact that some professional told them they had none.
Ultimately, I'm a pragmatist. If something works, I use it. If it doesn't, I don't use it. For the vast majority of cancers, conventional treatments simply do not work. And personally, I would never use any of them on any cancer. You can greatly increase your odds of extending that 5-year survival rate by changing your diet, even if you choose to have conventional treatments. If caught during the initiation or promotion stage, a true anti-cancer diet has a 100% chance of reversing the disease, in my opinion. Beyond that, the odds obviously become longer. When there is not complete recovery, nutritional treatments have extended patients' lives from months to years. In the worst cases, nutritional treatments have minimized or eliminated the pain and suffering patients endured in their final days. And in all cases, it has enhanced the quality of their lives, allowing them to spend their time living instead of dying. The trick, of course, is not to get a major cancer at all, because preventing cancer is a lot easier than reversing it. The person who follows a lousy diet and lifestyle dies slowly. He has a decades-long descent into death that is marked by ill health, drugs, and medical care. The person who follows a good diet and active lifestyle dies quickly and avoids that slow, painful descent into death. The difference between the two is the quality of life. We now have a standardized conveyor belt-like delivery of cancer therapy that, in the vast majority of cases, leads directly to the funeral home. Since the war on cancer began, we have been involved in a massive experiment which uses our bodies, our health, our wealth, and our goodwill to test the proposition that modern science can improve upon the medicines found in nature. In the case of cancer, they cannot, and never will. And in time, the war on cancer will be regarded as one of the biggest tragedies in medical history. Mary Harrington healed stage 4 melanoma. My father did not. The doctor told him he was terminal, that he should go home and prepare to die. And that is exactly what he did. Had I known then what I know now, things would have been different. Treatments were available, but his doctor did not know about them, nor did I. But I now have hope for others. I hope that people will take charge of their lives and realize that changing their diets can change their destiny. I hope they will explore all options and make their own decisions about their health. What matters after you're gone is not what you've learned, but what you've taught. So I hope you will take this message to others and teach them how to heal themselves. I hope that, although we must all die eventually, you will want to die with dignity and on your terms, not the terms of unproven, ineffective medicines. And finally, I hope that you will realize that true cures, long-term healing, always works from the inside out. Thank you for joining me today. My father died of cancer. My stepfather died of heart disease. My mother has severe osteoporosis. My sister-in-law is diabetic. A friend of mine was just diagnosed with breast cancer. My neighbor's on heart medicines and cholesterol-lowering drugs. All this sound familiar? What's not so familiar is that these health problems were caused by eating habits. In fact, eating is the biggest cause of disease, disabilities, and death in the U.S. today. And according to the Surgeon General, eating kills 2 out of 3 Americans every year. The American eating habit, in other words, is officially suicidal. For most of my life, I never made the connection. I was your typical American yuppie eating what I thought was a healthy diet. But that's just the problem. What we call a healthy diet, in fact what the government defines as a healthy diet, is health dangerous. People are dying of heart attacks, cancers, and other diseases because they're following these healthy guidelines. I remember the widow of a famous man saying she did everything right. She followed all the guidelines until she died of cancer in her early 60s. Later on, you'll meet Dr. Joseph Crow, a surgeon at the Cleveland Clinic who suffered a heart attack at the age of 44. And he completely reversed his heart disease by not following government guidelines. And you'll also meet Dr. Neil Pinkney, a psychologist who ate the standard American diet until his coronary arteries became blocked. Instead of bypass surgery, he reversed his heart disease by rejecting the advice of 4 doctors. And you'll meet Dr. Ruth Heydrich, a marathon runner who ate much better than government guidelines. She got breast cancer in her 40s as a result, and she beat the cancer only by waking up and not following the advice of 5 doctors. We assume we know more about health and nutrition now than we did back in the 1800s. Yet people living back then did not die because of what they ate. Before 1900, heart disease, our biggest killer, wasn't even included in medical textbooks. And cancer, diabetes, arthritis, and our other major diseases were rare and confined to the wealthy, who ate like most Americans eat today. People back then did not die of our current diseases because their eating habits were very different. Bread, potatoes, corn, oats, rye, barley meals, beans, and other vegetables, fruits, and whole grains were the major foods in their diets. Meat, dairy products, eggs, and fish were uncommon on the plates of working-class Americans. It's not that they didn't want these foods, they simply could not afford them. But during the 20th century, everything changed. As animal foods became more affordable, Americans switched from their plant-based diets to animal-based diets. This triggered the biggest dietary change in human history and ushered in a new era of eating-related diseases. By the middle of the century, Americans were suddenly dying of heart attacks, and cancer had all the earmarks of an epidemic in the making. In the last half of the century, we doubled our meat consumption until the average American was eating more meat than they weighed, 225 pounds of meat every year. And while we were gorging ourselves on meat, our consumption of plant foods was reduced to iceberg lettuce, greasy French fries, and ketchup. And over half our calories came from refined foods containing artery-clogging fats. By the year 2000, the American diet had been turned completely upside down. As a result, heart disease rose from an obscure illness to become our #1 killer. Cancer, diabetes, and other little-known diseases became household names. We became the fattest nation on the planet, and we turned eating into the most popular form of unassisted suicide.
Today, the majority of school children already have signs of heart disease, and many are now taking cholesterol-lowering drugs. And 85% of adults suffer from hardening of the arteries. And half of the entire population will die prematurely due to heart disease. And over 40% of the population will develop a life-threatening cancer.
We've become a nation of walking wounded because of our diet. What Americans consider to be a healthy diet today is like a train wreck to the body. By age 65, we stuff over 50 tons of food down our throats, enough to fill 6 of these garbage trucks. In those quantities, the type of food you eat can devastate your body. Take a look at this staggering list of just some of the health disorders and diseases that are linked to our current eating habit. Americans are not unique. When people in other parts of the world abandon their traditional plant-based diets and start eating like Americans, they start dying like Americans. The pattern is not only obvious, but totally predictable. No matter where you look, when people adopt animal-based diets, heart disease and cancer suddenly become their biggest killers. This is now happening throughout the world in countries like Japan and China, where they're replacing rice and vegetables
with meat and dairy products, and American eating diseases are spreading like wildfire. The one thing an animal-based diet does best is kill people. It does this by clogging arteries and restricting the flow of blood and oxygen throughout the body. Deprive the heart of oxygen, you get a heart attack. Deprive the brain of oxygen, you get a stroke. Deprive your tissues and cells of oxygen, and you set up the underlying cause of all cancers. Eating animal foods causes a fatty sludge buildup in your blood, and some of it sticks to the sides of your arteries. Your blood should be as clean and clear as the wine in this glass. When you eat a high-fat meal, it creates a fatty sludge buildup in your blood and causes your body to spend the next 5 hours cleaning up the mess. Of course, the excess fat and cholesterol eventually settles, usually in your arteries. This picture shows how fat and cholesterol build up in the arteries and restrict the flow of blood. The blue circle shows how wide the artery should be, and the red circle shows how narrow it has become. Now imagine blood vessels throughout your entire body clogging up like this. The vast majority of our major diseases today, ranging from heart disease to spinal disc deterioration to senility, are ultimately the result of clogged arteries. In other words, clogged arteries go far beyond heart disease, and almost all Americans have heart disease throughout their entire bodies. The seriousness of clogged blood vessels can't be exaggerated. More people die from blood vessel diseases than from all other causes of death combined. The primary cause of clogged blood vessels is cholesterol, and the only dietary source of cholesterol on the planet is animal foods. Animal foods close arteries. Plant foods open them. This is why our switch from a plant-based diet to an animal-based diet has been the biggest health disaster in human history. In fact, it's been estimated that cholesterol has contributed to more deaths than all the wars of the 20th century, all natural disasters, and all automobile accidents combined. Human bodies simply cannot handle cholesterol. It's the Achilles heel and fatal weakness of an animal-based diet. Movies and history books glorify man slaying animals and make it seem like eating meat was a daily event, but eating animals was extremely rare. In fact, ancient man was more the hunted than the hunter. Since the beginning, some 5 million years ago, humans have been, for all practical purposes, plant-eating vegetarians, living on fruits, leaves, nuts, berries, and other plant foods. Ancient humans ate over 800 varieties of fruits and vegetables. We can eat an unlimited amount of plant foods with health-enhancing effects, but we can only eat a tiny amount of animal foods before our arteries start to get clogged. Cholesterol has been called the animal's revenge because the animals you eat leave a little bit of themselves behind in your arteries every time you eat them, and they'll kill you from their graves. Our liver produces all the cholesterol we'll ever need on its own, and the requirement for cholesterol in our diet is exactly 0. Just ask Dr. Joseph Crow, a doctor at the Cleveland Clinic Foundation. Dr. Crow had no family history of heart disease. He was fit, did not smoke, and had a total cholesterol of just 156 when he suddenly experienced a heart attack at the age of 44.
In fact, I was about as close as you can get to not seeing tomorrow, so to speak. My diet was, I would say, pretty much a standard, American diet. We would eat chicken, fish, and we would eat, beef. But I wouldn't say every day.
Instead of dangerous surgery, Dr. Esselstyn, a colleague at the Cleveland Clinic and one of the world's leading authorities in heart disease reversal, told him to simply change his diet. Just a few months after changing his diet, Dr. Crow's cholesterol went from 156 to 89 without any medication.
It was a big change in the diet, and it was reflected in my blood work. And I was just following the diet, and I was exercising. I mean, I wasn't doing anything else, and I didn't take any medication. The whole set, my total cholesterols have been under 100 without any medication since I started the diet.
Just 32 months after changing his diet, Dr. Crow's heart disease was completely reversed. This picture shows the diseased, shriveled artery on the left and his healed artery on the right. Dramatic proof of how a plant-based diet heals from within. Dr. Neil Pinckney knows something about clogged arteries. His father died of heart disease at the age of 59. At the age of 58, Dr. Pinckney almost met the same fate when he discovered that his main coronary artery was 100% blocked and the other two were 90 and 85% blocked.
What I did was I thought I was doing all the healthy things. I gave up a lot of steak and roast and pork and ate chicken and fish instead. And I ate white meat chicken breast. Well, I didn't know that a white meat chicken breast had just about the same amount of cholesterol as a T-bone steak. I had no idea, and I was a cheeseaholic. Not only did it give me much more sodium than I needed, but it was giving me 60 or 70% of my calories from fat, when now I'm only at 10% of my calories of fat. It was cheese and the other foods were plugging up my arteries and sending me to the hospital. What one of the doctors said was very apt. He said, "You've got one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel."
His cardiologist told him he needed emergency bypass surgery or he would die. He decided to save his own life by walking away from that surgery.
And they said, "Well, you don't want this life-saving procedure?" And I said, "No, it's against my religion." And they all looked at me very quizzically and said, "What is your religion?" And I said, "I'm a devout coward." So with that, against their advice, I went home to learn about how I could repair the damage myself and do something on my own to reverse the heart disease. And I did.
After leaving his surgeons behind, Dr. Pinckney began reading books on reversing heart disease and changing his diet.
My angina, the pain that was so severe, within 2 weeks it was almost all gone. Within 2 months it was completely gone, and I started walking up. I couldn't walk 200 feet without severe pain and have to sit down. And just 3 months later, I was walking 2 miles up a steep hill with no pain. 7 months after I started this program, I finished in the middle of the pack of an 8.2-mile Great Aloha Run, and I had never run a race before in my life. The chief of cardiology was so amazed, he couldn't believe it, that he started sending his patients to my support groups instead of to bypass surgery. 99% of the people who are scheduled for bypasses shouldn't have to have them, as long as they're willing to make changes in their lifestyle. That seems to be much more sensible than having a stent put in, which will close up again if you don't change your lifestyle, or a bypass operation, which will plug up again eventually, maybe in a year, maybe in 5 years, but it's going to plug up again unless the lifestyle is changed.
Dr. Esselstyn is one of the world's leading experts at treating heart disease. He says heart disease can be stopped in its tracks and reversed by adopting a simple plant-based diet. He should know. He's conducted the longest and most successful heart disease reversal program ever.
Well, the American Heart Association is recommending presently to keep maintaining cholesterol under 200, and the dietary fat in your be less than 30%. But if you look at people who are consuming a fat level of 30%, not only have we never seen regression of disease at that level, but indeed there are studies that indicate there is progression of disease at that level. So literally, if you follow the guidelines of the American Heart Association Step 1 diet, that literally guarantees that millions of Americans will continue to perish from this disease. What happens when our nutrient support comes from foods that not in a decade, or not in 2 decades, or not in 3 decades, but eventually will cause us to be ravaged by these disease conditions that really occupy about 70% of medical therapy that we see today. We know now, from data that we have, that through the so-called brachial artery tourniquet test, that with a single needle you can demonstrate the endothelial injury that occurs to the vascular system. And that's the problem with today with the most well-intentioned internists and cardiologists, that you're only having roast beef once or twice a week now, no longer regularly. You're only occasionally having chicken. You're eating less cheese, you're eating less cream, you're eating less butter. And as a result, instead of pouring gallons of gasoline on the fire, you're pouring quarts of gasoline on the fire. And as a result, the fire doesn't go out. This is tremendously empowering for the patient, because the patient has become the locus of control, not the cardiologist, not the surgeon. And it's so reassuring to them to think that I am in charge of this disease that previously was trying to destroy me. Not only do you escape stroke and heart attack, but this also would include obesity, hypertension, adult onset diabetes, and the common Western cancers of breast in the female, prostate in the male, and colon in both. So I think the spin-offs here, in terms of overall health, are extremely profound.
Mainstream medical authorities recommend a cholesterol level of under 200, yet 1/3 of all new heart attacks occur in people with cholesterol levels between 150 and 200. The only safe level is under 150, and health authorities know it. This was established years ago in the largest heart disease study ever undertaken. Mainstream medical authorities recommend a 30% fat diet, yet there is not one instance where such a diet has either arrested or reversed heart disease. In fact, that level of fat promotes heart disease. Why such a high-fat recommendation? Because our esteemed health authorities readily accept money from food lobbies pushing high-fat foods, and that money shapes their recommendations. Health authorities who argue that a 30% fat diet is heart healthy do not have a single case of heart disease arrest or reversal to point to. Not a single solitary individual. And it shouldn't be for a lack of funding. Dr. Neil Pinckney accomplished his heart disease reversal and actually saved money on groceries. And it isn't just coincidence that individuals throughout the world eating low-fat diets do not get heart disease, nor do they get our common cancers. The biggest killer in America today is the result of high-fat diets the American government and mainstream authorities are promoting that are fueled by the money given to them by food lobbies pushing high-fat foods. Diet is the only cure for heart disease, yet it's lost in the news by drug companies developing ever more profitable drugs that do not cure the disease, but only serve to keep Americans on the very diet that causes heart disease.
Man walked out of Africa just 150,000 years ago. That's the blink of an eye in terms of human evolution. In the mere span of just 100 years, we've become so accustomed to eating animal foods, we think it's the normal, natural, healthy way to eat. It isn't. We also think that dying of heart disease is a normal way of dying. It isn't. Dying of heart disease is about as normal as dying of a drug overdose, and it shouldn't happen at any age. Show me a population eating an animal-based diet, and I'll show you a population where cancer is the second biggest killer, after heart disease. In fact, heart disease and cancer are the two hallmark diseases of an animal-based diet. In 1971, President Nixon declared a war on cancer and promised a cure for the disease within 7 years. We all know that didn't happen. The war on cancer has not only been ineffective, but the search for a so-called cure has been totally misguided. Now close your blinds, turn down the volume, and make sure no one else is watching, because I'm about to let you in on a dirty little secret. Ready? We already have a cure for cancer. It's called the immune system. Your immune system not only protects you against colds and flus, but it's been protecting humans from cancer since the very beginning. It's the only cure for cancer we have. Always has been and always will be. The biggest cause of cancer is not radiation, chemicals in the water, or pollutants in the air, but a weakened immune system that cannot recognize and kill cancer cells. In other words, you can't prevent cancer. You're going to get cancer cells in your body. The average adult gets at least one cancer cell in their body every single day, and there's nothing you can do to prevent this from happening. The question is not whether you'll get cancer, but whether your immune system is healthy enough to kill cancer cells and stop them from multiplying. Autopsy studies have shown that by age 50, almost half of all women have breast cancer, and 40% of men have prostate cancer. And nearly all Americans have some form of cancer growing inside their bodies. This is because our immune systems have become seriously weakened due to our change in diet. This is why populations eating animal-based diets are plagued with cancers, and those eating plant-based diets are not. Don't look to the cancer industry for a cure. The cure for cancer is right inside you. And the only way to win your personal war on cancer is to strengthen your immune system by changing your diet. Plant foods are the only foods that strengthen the immune system and contain cancer-fighting nutrients. So a change to a plant-based diet turns out to be the only real cure for cancer we have. The strongest cancer-fighting medicines on the planet don't have scary names, and they're not found in hospitals, but in your humble grocery store. The founder of the macrobiotic diet actually cured himself of cancer by adopting a 100% plant-based diet that strengthened his immune system.
A surgeon developed breast cancer and her tumor grew to the size of a grapefruit. She rejected conventional treatments and completely cured her cancer by radically changing her diet and lifestyle.
Another physician found out he had prostate cancer that had spread throughout his body. On the chance advice of two strangers, he adopted a 100% plant-based diet and reversed his cancer. There are thousands of cases where people have reversed serious cancers by changing to a strict plant-based diet. Cancer cells don't just fade away. The only thing that will defeat cancer is a strong immune system, and plant foods strengthen that immune system. Just ask Dr. Ruth Heydrich, who was diagnosed with breast cancer over 20 years ago, despite the fact she was eating better and exercising more back then than what government guidelines recommend today.
It can't be cancer. I'm too healthy. I'm a marathoner, for God's sake. I can't have cancer. This lump is something else. I was horrified, mortified, felt betrayed by my body, thought this can't be happening. So even though I felt healthy, there was this insidious cancer that was growing inside me. I didn't know it for a long time.
After her surgery, she was faced with the prospect of chemotherapy and radiation treatments to kill cancer cells that had spread throughout her body.
When I was told that I needed chemotherapy and radiation, I was dreading it. I was thinking it was scary. I really did not want to have poison injected in my veins. And having worked for the military, I knew what radiation damage could do to a body. I did not want that. So I was looking for something to tell me another way. I just maybe intuitively felt that there has to be another answer.
She sought not just a second opinion, but 5 second opinions, until she found Dr. John McDougall, who said in no uncertain terms her breast cancer was caused by her diet.
Before my dietary change, I ate what I call the SAD diet, the standard American diet. Well, I knew that it wasn't diet in my case, but let's prove it to the world. And I knew because I was not eating any red meat. I had only skim milk and chicken and fish. And so when I went to see Dr. McDougall, he said, that's the diet that caused your breast cancer. I was shocked. He said, if you want to save your life, change your diet. And of course my response was, let's see, let's prove it one way or the other. And then I thought, oh, it's too late. And he said, no, it's not too late, because your immune system, you've had the surgery, you've removed that tumor. Now what your body has to do is kill off those stray cancer cells that have, without any doubt, already spread through your body. What your body now has to do is kind of a mop-up operation, and that's what diet enables that immune system to do. The major point, though, is that you search for the cause. Breast cancer is a symptom of a lousy diet.
She refused chemotherapy and radiation treatments and switched to a 100% plant-based diet. 20 years later, she's cancer-free and credits her new diet with saving her life. Breast cancer thrives in an estrogen-rich environment, and women in America are literally swimming in estrogen, with levels up to twice as high as women eating plant-based diets. Animal-based diets also cause girls to begin their menstrual cycles at a much younger age than girls eating plant-based diets. In just 140 years, the average age of puberty in U.S. girls has dropped from 17 to 12, and menopause starts 4 years later. In other words, an animal-based diet has added 9 years of menstrual cycles to the lives of women.
How do we know this is caused by diet? Because girls raised in the U.S. and throughout the world on plant-based diets reach their puberty at the normal age.
Usually, parents take great pride as they see their children mature, and they think, oh, my daughter's, we're getting graphic again, started her periods when she was 11 years old, and they think that this is good. Actually, it's bad. It increases the risk of breast cancer, premature death, heart disease, all these other problems. We need to turn it around and try to delay the onset of puberty in our children.
Men on animal-based diets also reach puberty earlier and have abnormally high levels of testosterone. And studies have linked high testosterone levels to prostate cancer. Men throughout the world eating traditional plant-based diets have normal testosterone levels and don't get prostate cancer. In 1993, the National Cancer Institute published the results of a study with women who had been treated for breast cancer. They told half the women to continue with their typical American diets and asked the other half to change to a plant-based diet. After only 4 years, almost 40% of the women who stayed on their animal-based diets had recurrences of breast cancer. Not a single woman who changed to a plant-based diet had a recurrence of breast cancer. The difference between the two groups? Animal-based diets feed cancers. Plant-based diets feed your immune system. Cancer just doesn't go away on its own, and it will return with a vengeance if your immune system can't fight it. When you look around the world, populations eating animal-based diets have skyrocketing rates of breast and other cancers, compared to those populations eating plant-based diets.
When I was diagnosed back in 1982, the incidence of breast cancer in women was 1 in 14. A couple of years after that, it was 1 in 12. Then I watched it 1 in 10, 1 in 8, and it's still increasing in frequency. And if you look at this planet Earth, and again, the incidence of breast cancer all around, you find it is highest in those countries that eat the most animal foods, that have the highest fat consumption. And conversely, breast cancer is extremely rare in those countries that can't afford to eat animals.
Plant-based diets also cure adult-onset diabetes, as well as many other diseases. The American Diabetes Association will tell you there is no cure for adult-onset diabetes, which simply means there is no drug that will cure the disease. And yet, adult-onset diabetes is easily and quickly cured with a change in diet and lifestyle.
So I don't really believe there are any intelligent people in the scientific community that have any doubt that type 2 diabetes is caused by the rich Western diet. I think everybody agrees with that. But what they don't do is they don't take the next step, which is say, okay, this is the cause of it, so what you ought to do is you ought to change your diet.
They come in and get on this program, and in 24 hours, they have cut their insulin by half. On day number 5 or 6, they don't need insulin at all, ever again. Now that, when you hear about it, I know sometimes you may hear things like this and you think, that's impossible. How could that be true? The doctor says this is incurable. You can't reverse it. It is not true. You can completely heal diabetes, and very, very quickly.
In most cases, 5 to 7 days. We have a few cases that are particularly severe. It might take 2 weeks.
We find in 5 to 7 days someone with type 2 diabetes, if they eat a 100% plant-based diet, they're no longer on insulin. I haven't seen that not happen.
So yes, the emphasis on treatment by the American Diabetic Association, by the American Heart Association, by the National Osteoporosis Foundation, and so on, they're all in the wrong direction. But they have a lot of big industry money that keeps them focused in that bad direction too. This didn't just happen by circumstance, by happenstance. This happened because there is an active flow of money that keeps them in the direction of drugs and not in the direction of good diet.
You don't have people coming with lupus and multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's and chronic fatigue syndrome and schizophrenia and obesity and diabetes and arthritis and osteoporosis and on and on. People with multiple sclerosis. I mean, some of them have even gone blind from these things, and we have reversed blindness from it. I've had people with MS that were debilitated. I mean, not to even be able to get up and walk on their own, completely completely healed. Parkinson's patients coming in on day 1, shaking so dramatically that they couldn't even hold their hand out to shake it. By day 10, steady as a rock. Lupus. People come in wheelchairs sometimes. I mean, literally cannot raise their arm enough to feed themselves. And within 10 days, they're up and out of that wheelchair and walking. You know, AIDS and HIV. I've got so many testimonies now. I had one gentleman come. His viral load for AIDS was over 103,000 when he started my program. In 3 months, his viral load had dropped to 3,030. In 9 months, they could not detect the virus in his body, and his T cells had gone all the way back up. So we hear all the time that AIDS is incurable. Well, if it's incurable, then how is it disappearing from the body?
If you're like many Americans, you might be thinking, but animal foods have nutrients I've been told I can't live without. Please enter the fantasy land of the animal food industries. In order to keep their profits healthy, some monumental myths have been cooked up about animal foods. If you worry about not getting enough protein, or if you think that milk builds strong bones, you've been brainwashed, and your eating habits have been programmed by advertisements. Both protein and calcium requirements are stupendously easy to meet. In the case of protein, you could eat nothing but potatoes and get adequate amounts of protein. In other words, you'd practically have to be starving not to get enough protein. Protein deficiency is extremely rare, except in areas of the world where people actually are starving. It's really pathetic. We're the fattest nation on the planet, we eat like horses, and we worry about something that will only happen if we're starving. Instead of your first nutrition worry, protein should be your rock bottom last. And if you're worried that not eating animal protein will somehow compromise your health, make you weaker or less manly, nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, it's just the opposite. Animal food actually makes you weaker.
In every endurance test ever conducted, those eating plant-based diets outperformed their meat-eating counterparts. In fact, when participants adopted a diet high in meat, milk, and eggs, they all performed worse. And Olympian Carl Lewis had the best year of his career, the first year he switched to a 100% plant-based diet. Lori Ann Lloyd fuels her body with a plant-based diet, and that has won her the world record in the obstacle course. And her record still stands unbeaten.
A lot of people have been on the obstacle course. Firemen, policemen. I do it because it's very challenging. Females are, I think they're more athletic than most people realize.
Lori, we call Lori the bionic woman. She's not human. When you see what she does on this course, she's not human. She's not.
For centuries, men have held on to the false notion that eating meat, especially red meat, will make them stronger and more masculine. But in fact, not only does it diminish their physical performance, but men end up far less virile because their arteries get clogged. And among many other things, clogged blood vessels cause impotence. Not too manly. High-fat meals also cause fatigue and make you limp. Get your Viagra and vegetables, not a pill. The meat myth is simply a fairy tale. Get your protein without the fat and cholesterol. You'll not only open your arteries, but your love life as well. All the foods listed here will easily meet your protein and other manly requirements. The protein content of many plant foods is even higher than beef, and unlike beef, these foods will never clog up your plumbing.
calcium brainwashing is even worse than protein brainwashing in that you'll consume adequate amounts of calcium on any natural diet. In fact, calcium deficiency of a dietary origin is not only unknown in the United States, but there has not been a single recorded instance of calcium deficiency of a dietary origin in the entire history of the human race. Despite this fact, the dairy industry claims that Americans somehow have a calcium deficiency, and, big surprise, we're told we have to consume more dairy products. But why would Americans be so special and have this calcium deficiency when populations around the world do not? And those populations consume a fraction of the calcium Americans do. They have no osteoporosis problem, and they get their calcium from plant foods, not dairy products. The reason Americans are so special is because dairy lobbies have paid off politicians and set U.S. calcium requirements sky high in order to sell their products. In other words, the same people selling calcium are setting our calcium requirements. And dietitians, doctors, and the public have bought into this because the government promotes dairy products. In fact, the amount of calcium you consume has nothing to do with bone loss. We're among the world's biggest consumers of calcium, and the more we consume, the more calcium ends up in the toilet, and the greater our incidence of osteoporosis.
To think the mere act of consuming more calcium, like taking a magic pill, will somehow make bones strong is pure and simple advertising. The primary cause of osteoporosis is a lack of weight-bearing activity due to a sedentary work and lifestyle. An example of how a lack of weight-bearing activity affects bone loss comes from astronauts, because they experience severe bone loss due to their gravity-free environment. In a similar fashion, people who are bedridden for long periods also suffer rapid bone loss. Bones are just like muscles. They get stronger and grow only when you put them under stress, just as muscles get stronger when you exercise them.
Bone is just like muscle. If you want to build a real bicep, you know what you have to do? Most people know that you can't just pop a protein pill and that it goes right to the muscle and builds it up. You have to really stress it. You have to put a lot of weight on it. Right underneath that muscle, we got a bone. The bone is more metabolically active than that muscle. When that bone is being stressed, or if you're lifting weights like this, the bone is saying, whoa, wait a minute, we're not prepared for this. We better lay down some stronger bone, and that's what happens.
In the past, we used to get paid for physical activity. Now we get paid for sitting in chairs all day. In the past, American women have had far less physical activity than men, and this is the primary reason osteoporosis strikes women harder than men. Physical activity is also the reason why women throughout the world who consume very low amounts of calcium keep their strong bones during and after menopause. Contrary to what you've been told, bone loss does not occur with age. It occurs when people become less active. You'll get enough calcium on any diet. Let your body determine the amount of calcium it needs, not the dairy industry. What you have to do is make your bones want to be stronger by exercising them. If they don't feel that need, like the bones of astronauts in space, they'll become weaker. Sharing heart disease among family and friends is part of the American way of life. And to suggest you not share diseases with your loved ones is downright un-American. Many people have taken to sharing the so-called lighter meats, like chicken, turkey, pork, and fish, thinking this will somehow prevent bad things from happening to their family and friends. If your doctor told you eating lighter meats will lower your cholesterol, you're just playing with your food.
What's the difference between white meat and red meat, in your opinion?
It's a question of whether you want to be shot or hung. I mean,
if you get a 3-ounce piece of steak, you get 75 milligrams of cholesterol. If you get a 3-ounce serving of white meat, skinless chicken, you get 72 milligrams of cholesterol. I mean, basically it's pretty much the same.
Health authorities like to talk about reducing risks by eating lighter meat, but reducing the risk of a heart attack isn't preventing one. The only way you're going to prevent a heart attack is to get your cholesterol below 150. And eating lighter meats won't get you there. So what about that good fat in fish? Well, that good fat originally came from plants, the plants eaten by fish. So you're not only getting the good fat secondhand, but you're getting it in a package of bad fat, cholesterol, PCBs, pesticides, and other poisons. And calorie for calorie, shrimp have 6 times the amount of cholesterol as beef. To say eating fish is healthy because it contains a little good fat is like saying Twinkies is healthy because it contains a little calcium. And what about those dairy products? Dairy, in fact, has been called liquid meat because it contains just as much fat and cholesterol as red meat. Drinking 3 glasses of milk a day, as the dairy industry and our government recommends, gives you the same amount of artery-clogging cholesterol as eating 21 slices of bacon. A pint of ice cream is worth 24 slices of bacon.
And at least one protein in dairy may trigger the onset of insulin-dependent diabetes in children. At least one hormone in dairy has been strongly linked to breast and prostate cancer. Over 50% of school children are allergic to dairy, and 70% of the population is lactose intolerant, particularly people of color. And due to the strong dairy lobby in Washington, this fat and cholesterol-laden food is required eating for all children enrolled in federal lunch programs, which also amounts to nutritional persecution of minorities due to their high rates of lactose intolerance. And yet, most doctors and dietitians still recommend milk every day. The next time you give your child milk and cookies, imagine giving them meat and cookies, because that's exactly what they're getting.
We live in a strange world when it comes to eating.
Don't you think it's strange that 1/3 of our raw materials and fossil fuels are consumed raising animals to eat? Don't you think it's strange that with the fuel used to create just a single hamburger, you could drive a car 20 miles? Don't you think it's strange that it's actually cheaper to drive a car any distance than to walk that same distance if your calories came from beef?
Don't you think it's strange that hamburger, one of the most resource-intensive and expensive foods on the planet, costs less than raspberries? Ever wonder how it's possible that fast food chains can still sell a hamburger for 99 cents? It's possible because of politics. Because our politicians provide massive subsidies to the animal food industries in return for political campaign financing. And without these subsidies, the cost of animal foods would be like it was in the past, and only the wealthy would be eating themselves to death. Because beef steak today would cost over $90 a pound without these subsidies. You may think you're calling the shots when you're preparing meals, but there's a politician in your kitchen, and he's already decided what you'll be eating tonight. In fact, the most health dangerous eating habit in human history is purely the result of government interference in the marketplace. Not only do animal food industries get subsidies to keep them in business, but they get a determining influence on our nutrition policies as well. The animal food lobbies have had their claws into everything from designing the government food pyramid to staffing government bureaucracies to setting our nutritional standards. And having these industries on government committees that decide what's healthy for Americans is like having Joe Camel on a committee designed to help people quit smoking. This is why so many Americans do everything right, yet die from following government guidelines.
Food industries spend $30 billion a year marketing their products. The marketing effort to promote natural whole foods is a mere $30 million a year. In other words, we spend over $100 per person each year promoting foods that cause disease and shorten lives, and only a dime promoting foods that prevent disease and prolong lives. The average consumer doesn't have a chance. Between government endorsement of animal products and heavy advertising, the typical American eats like a trained seal, and the training starts early. The average child is exposed to over 10,000 food messages on television every year, and our eating habits are an exact reflection of marketing efforts. Sad as this may sound, the best thing you can do for your child's health is to turn off the television.
Not too long ago, Americans thought there was nothing wrong with smoking. Doctors smoked and even recommended cigarettes to their patients. Cool Cigarettes ran ads that their product actually prevented colds, and the media was filled with health claims for cigarettes. The tobacco industries used doctors to prove their case, and they used health claims in their slogans. As late as 1950, the American medical community still did not think smoking was a factor in lung cancer. And the American Medical Association had a cozy financial relationship with the tobacco industry. And to this day, tobacco executives deny that nicotine is addictive and claim that smoking does not cause lung cancer or any other disease. Today, we have the same attitude about animal foods. Like the tobacco industry, the animal food industries have all had advertisements taken off under court order because they were caught lying. And like tobacco executives, meat, dairy, and egg executives will swear that animal foods have nothing to do with heart disease, cancer, or any other disease, despite the medical evidence to the contrary. What smoking does for your lungs, cholesterol does for your arteries, and the damage is even more lethal. What the animal food industries are doing for American health today is precisely what the tobacco industry did for our health just a few decades ago, only worse. By subsidizing the animal food industries, the government promotes an eating habit that's the biggest killer in America today. Like the tobacco industry, animal food industries publish phony studies, deny there are any risks involved in eating their products, and fight tooth and nail for every subsidy they can get. Like the tobacco industry, the animal food industries collect billions in subsidies and pocket billions in profits. And the public gets stiffed with higher taxes, disease, disabilities, and premature death. And we pay billions more for health care to treat problems caused by the foods these industries and the government promote. When I first changed to a plant-based diet, I switched overnight, and my diet evolved as I learned more about food. I can't imagine myself ever eating any other way. It's the most delicious and varied diet I can conceive of, and those who think otherwise simply haven't tried it. It's not like you have to eat Brussels sprouts all day. This is really an old-fashioned diet. All you have to do is reorient your thinking about food. We're all attached to our favorite animal foods, and it's difficult to give them up. So if you're unprepared for a complete switch, do the best you can by gradually replacing foods in your diet. Eat the old-fashioned way by making animal foods only a very occasional part of your diet until you feel comfortable making a complete switch. It's actually a lot easier than you think. Your diet can evolve, but keep pushing it. The closer you move to a complete plant-based diet, the greater the health benefits.
When you follow a whole foods plant-based diet, you'll notice several things immediately.
First, you'll discover you were constipated and didn't even know it. Your bowel movements will be easier and more frequent. Be happy. Your body's getting rid of toxic substances on a regular basis. The second thing you'll notice, if you have it checked, is a drop in cholesterol.
Well, the first time I'm in Dr. McDougall's office, he had said, bring your medical records with you. He's looking through everything and he said, I said, what? He said, your cholesterol is high, 236. You know, at that level, you are at as great a risk of having a heart attack and dying of heart disease as you are the breast cancer. Dr. McDougall said, change your diet and it'll take care of the cholesterol as well. 3 weeks later, exactly 21 days later, back in his office, blood test, cholesterol, 160. 236, 160 in 3 weeks. No medication, no nothing. Just quit eating the stuff and it goes away.
My own cholesterol went from 372, it's now 124.
The third thing you'll notice is weight loss. What you won't notice immediately are the changes going on inside you. The clearing of fat and cholesterol from your blood vessels, the freer oxygen flow to all parts of your body, the strengthening of your immune system, and many other changes that will make you healthier and happy you adopted a new way of eating. And the changes this diet can make to your health by just opening up your blood vessels can be profound in many different ways. Long before our food revolution, Thomas Edison wrote, "The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will involve the patient in the proper use of food, fresh air, and exercise." If you ask your doctors what you should be eating to fight arthritis, menstrual cramps, or cancer, they won't have a clue. But they will know what drugs to prescribe. But drugs only treat symptoms. Cholesterol-lowering drugs treat a symptom of a bad eating habit. Treating the cause of high cholesterol means eliminating cholesterol from your diet. The most often heard phrase in the cancer industry is early detection. But that's early detection of a symptom. The real cause of cancer is a weakened immune system that's weakened by the foods we eat. Tragically, the bulk of our vast medical establishment is dedicated to treating symptoms, not causes. And symptoms of diseases that were not even common before 1900. The mutilating surgeries, the billions of dollars spent on drugs, are for the most part treating symptoms of a lousy diet. You might be asking, why doesn't my doctor know about the powerful effects of diet? Simply put, they haven't been trained in plant-based nutrition.
We are not educated, we are not trained, and we are not in any way supported to work with our patient population in terms of education, disease prevention, and wellness. We are trained to focus on fixing the problem after it occurs, not preventing the problem, and that's true of all of medicine these days.
Before you make a life-altering decision, Get the advice of doctors who are trained in plant-based nutrition, who are completely reversing diseases by simple changes in diet and avoiding the use of drugs and surgery. Read the books listed at the end, and the next time you visit your doctor, don't be afraid to question his or her advice or seek second opinions. After all, it wasn't that long ago that doctors were advising pregnant women to smoke.
The human body is a miracle, and it's constantly trying to heal itself from the wounds inflicted on it by an animal-based eating habit. Because the best doctor on the planet is still right inside all of us. Raising animals to eat is the most inefficient, wasteful, and environmentally destructive method of producing food imaginable. This may surprise you, but we grow far more food to feed the animals we eat than we grow to feed ourselves. Farm animals consume 80% of American corn, 80% of American grain, and over 95% of American oats.
87% of our total agricultural land is dedicated to raising the animals we eat. That's almost half of the entire landmass in the U.S.
Almost 90% of deforestation is due to our appetite for beef. To date, over 260 million acres of forest have been destroyed to provide cattle with grazing land, and another acre disappears every 8 seconds.
The primary reason the Amazon forest is being destroyed is not to harvest wood or provide more room for a growing population, but to provide grazing fields for cattle and land to grow feed crops for livestock, so meat can be exported to other countries. A single hamburger exported to the U.S. results in 67 square feet of rainforest being cleared. Every second, another acre is gone. Every second, the lungs of the world are shrinking. Brazil not only exports its meat, but exports almost all of its crops in order to feed livestock in other countries. 2/3 of U.S. grain exports also feed cattle in other countries. Ironically, there is plenty of food for the animals we eat, but not enough food for the millions of starving people throughout the world. When we clear forests to raise animals, the carbon dioxide stored in trees is released into the atmosphere. And these forest clearing fires represent a whopping 20% of all greenhouse gases. Our appetite for meat, in other words, is a major factor in global warming. One of the biggest challenges facing the future of modern civilization is global warming. And our diet plays a huge role in warming up the planet. Raising hundreds of millions of animals around the world generates more greenhouse gases than all the cars, trucks, planes, and ships in the world combined. The production of just 2 pounds of beef creates the same amount of carbon dioxide as going for a joyride for 3 hours, while leaving all the lights in your home blazing. The consequences of our eating habit are so staggering that if everyone laid off meat just 1 day a week, it would have the same effect as taking 8 million cars off American roads. Eating meat is more significant than most realize because not all greenhouse gases are created equal. While everyone focuses on carbon dioxide, this gas is not responsible for most of the Earth's warming. Other gases trap heat far more powerfully than carbon dioxide, and the most important of these is methane. Methane is over 20 times more powerful in trapping heat than carbon dioxide. In fact, methane emissions are responsible for nearly half of the planet's human-induced warming. The number one source of methane? Raising animals for food. Global meat consumption has skyrocketed in the last 50 years, and current consumption is expected to double in the next 50 years, which means our meat-eating habit will be catastrophic for future generations. The good news? Unlike carbon dioxide, which can stay in the atmosphere for more than a century, methane cycles out of the atmosphere in just 8 years. In other words, by changing your diet, you can have an immediate impact on the cooling of the Earth at every single meal. This is perhaps an embarrassing truth that Al Gore failed to mention in his famous documentary. Embarrassing because his family has always raised Angus beef, one of the biggest methane emitters in the world. Here are his top recommendations. All of these are necessary, but he, like others, have missed the 800-pound gorilla sitting in the room. Not a single mention of the cause of nearly half of our global warming. Hard as this may be to swallow, putting the wrong type of food into your mouth is one of the most significant causes of global warming. And the single most effective thing you can do to help stop global warming is to change your diet. Our diet impacts the environment in many other ways.
The massive amount of crops grown to feed livestock and water pastures consumes over half of the fresh water supply in the U.S. It takes 12,000 gallons of fresh water to produce just 1 pound of beef versus 60 gallons to produce a pound of potatoes. 12 miles of the San Joaquin River in California are now completely dry because water has been diverted to grow crops for farm animals. In some areas, so much water has been diverted from hydroelectric dams that nuclear power plants have had to be constructed to make up for the loss of power. The average American uses just 106 gallons of water a day for domestic needs. But if they eat a quarter-pound hamburger, their daily consumption of water jumps by 3,000 gallons. In the year 2000, the average American consumed 69 pounds of beef and a total of 225 pounds of meat. By giving up meat, you'd be saving over 1 million gallons of fresh water every year. If you added to the price of beef just the water subsidies alone, hamburger would cost $35 a pound. Instead of tinkering with your toilets and shower heads, reducing meat consumption is the best way to conserve our fresh water supplies. Our diet is not only using huge amounts of water, but it's actually depleting our fresh water supplies. The largest source of fresh water in the world will be completely dry in less than 50 years. And once it dries up, the breadbasket of the U.S. will turn into a dustbin. That's the legacy our diet will leave to our children. Eating animals not only consumes half our water, but their excrement pollutes the other half. In fact, farm animals produce 130 times more waste than people do. And yet, not one feedlot or farm in America is required to have a proper sewage system.
It's become so bad that animal waste flowing down the Mississippi River has made an area the size of New Jersey totally uninhabitable to marine life. It's called the dead zone.
E. coli, salmonella, listeria, and all the other fancy scientific names used to describe food pathogens all boil down to the same thing for the consumer. There's animal excrement in your food. It's become so bad that E. coli is now the leading cause of kidney failure among American children. Modern meat is so burdened with animal waste, you could actually clean it in your toilet. It's safer eating a carrot anywhere but in your kitchen, if meat has been there. Packaged meat now carries a warning label telling consumers to wash everything that's even come into contact with meat. The reason you have to cook it so long is to make sure the animal excrement is safe for you to eat. It's no longer a question of whether there's manure in your meat. It's a question of how to deal with it. The meat industry's answer is not to get rid of it, but to nuke the whole package with radiation. Now, all you have to worry about is getting used to the taste of a mouthful of dead bacteria from fried farm animal feces.
We're also depleting our oceans of marine life and setting in motion a trend that some say will result in the whole-scale collapse of marine ecosystems within 40 years. Using sophisticated technology to sweep the oceans with massive nets, we're now taking more fish out of the ocean than can reproduce, and wreaking havoc on the very foundation of life on Earth. The irony is that farm animals eat far more fish than people do. In fact, half of the world's fish catch is fed to livestock. As it turns out, the best first step you can take to help save the oceans is to stop eating farm animals.
We're also losing our biological diversity because of our appetite for beef. For decades, the U.S. government had a program designed to totally exterminate wolves in order to protect cattle. Currently, the U.S. government slaughters 1.5 million animals every year to protect cattle. This is yet another government subsidy that benefits a few large corporations. These are just some of the victims. Our farm animals are neither happy nor healthy. In fact, they're tortured, disease-ridden, drugged-up, cancer-carrying shadows of the old-fashioned farm animals your great-grandparents ate. Modern farms view animals as machines which can be manipulated to produce more offspring, lay more eggs, produce more milk, and grow faster and fatter than ever before. Farm animals are genetically altered and systematically mutilated to squeeze the last penny from them before they end up on your plates. The picture is not pretty. In fact, the modern farm is more like a concentration camp for animals.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a soul.
The American eating habit is supporting a system of animal cruelty on a scale never before seen in history. Some of you may think this is only cruelty against animals dumb enough to eat. But would you eat your dog? Or cat? Or horse? Indians consider cows to be part of the family. We eat them. We consider dogs to be part of the family. Asians eat them. Most people say they're animal lovers, yet they eat farm animals 3 times a day. And yet farm animals are as feeling as any household pet, and in many cases, far more intelligent. How humans decide what animals they eat defies all logic, because there's no difference between a slice of dog meat in Korea and a slice of bacon in Kansas. When we talk to animals or touch them, our blood pressure falls, and so does theirs. The animals we eat have come to trust humans for their care, and we violate that trust every time we make them into a meal. You can make this double standard disappear, improve your health and the environment as well, by simply not eating them.
Not only does eating animals cause degenerative diseases, but eating animals has also caused the major infectious diseases in our history, including smallpox, influenza, tuberculosis, malaria, plague, measles, and cholera. These diseases have emerged as a result of taking animals out of their natural habitats and putting them into unnatural settings where their diseases mutate and eventually infect humans. Primarily due to our increasing appetite for animals, 75% of all new infectious diseases discovered during the last 30 years have come from animals. The new strains of influenza and other diseases now coming out of Asia are the direct result of Asians changing to an animal-based diet. In an effort to stop these diseases, 70% of our antibiotic supply is not used on humans at all, but farm animals. And as bacteria become resistant to antibiotics used on farm animals, it makes them less effective on humans. In just 2 decades, penicillin has become only 18% as effective as it once was against common bacteria. In trying to prevent diseases in animals so we can eat them, we have made ourselves more vulnerable to the very diseases we are trying to prevent. As a result of eating animals, we not only kill ourselves with degenerative diseases, but we kill ourselves with infectious diseases that leap from the animals we eat to man. The biggest killer of humans in the history of life on this planet, in fact, turns out to be the human appetite for animals.
We kill billions of wild animals to protect the animals we eat. We then destroy our environment to feed the animals we eat. We spend more time, money, and resources fattening the animals we eat than we do feeding humans who are actually starving. The greatest irony is that after all the expense of raising these animals, we eat them and they kill us. And instead of recognizing this insanity, we torture and kill millions of other animals trying to find a cure to the diseases caused by eating animals in the first place. When it comes to eating, humans are without question the dumbest animals on the planet. The typical American eats over 3,000 farm animals in a lifetime. Here is what Time magazine has said about the health and environmental costs of our eating habit. Much as we have awakened to the full economic and social costs of cigarettes, we will find we can no longer subsidize or ignore the cost of mass-producing cattle, poultry, pigs, sheep, and fish to feed our growing population. These costs include hugely inefficient use of fresh water and land, heavy pollution from livestock feces, rising rates of heart disease and other degenerative illnesses, and spreading destruction of our forests, on which much of the planet's life depends. According to some, humans are now consuming more natural resources than the Earth can sustain, and eating animal foods is one of the major reasons. We're currently locked in a vicious cycle of corporate greed that feeds off the political system, destroys American bodies, devastates the environment, and has turned our farms into something we should all be ashamed of. You now have an opportunity to do something great, not just for yourself, but for your children and generations to come. The simple act of changing your diet will not only give you a healthier and longer life, but will help reverse an eating habit that's destroying the very fabric of our lives. It all starts with one person. And if enough people change their diets, our modern eating habit can be transformed into something we can all be proud of, that not only benefits our bodies, but the world we live in. Thank you for joining me today.